here in the flood when we were rescuing people, you were dealing with them one-to-one. I mean, you were looking right, when they walked out of the door of their house, you were looking right at them, you know. And so dealing with that, seeing people with that fear in their eye and knowing that they were leaving everything behind and stuff, that was probably about the biggest hard thing to see.
For us, there was a certain amount of frustration that had built throughout the whole week of losing those battles in the city. And at least the collector well gave the community and the city staff a place to, it was our Alamo, it gave us a place to fight back the Cedar River and take out that frustration.
All the people that kept coming and coming to help. And there were times that I would look away and turn back 2 seconds later and there'd be another 10 or 20 people standing there. Just how everyone showed up to help is just amazing.
It was really kind of something special to be a part of. As tragic as the event was, it was the way everybody pulled together. It was just an amazing experience.
We went home. I could go home and shower, and I could go home and sit on my couch. These people had nothing. That was hard. That was the worst thing.
They didn't have to say thanks. They just lost everything, and you know they're the ones telling the volunteers, "Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for everything." You know, it was heart-wrenching at the same time. It's just, you know, it was great to see humanity at its best.
My friend Brad Canfield called me up and said, "Hey, let's go to lunch." So we go to lunch and we're sitting there and he goes, "Sure, people lost their homes. People lost all their belongings. You lost your business. You lost your retirement. You lost your job." He goes, "It's not a contest. It's all bad."
This is an incredibly resilient community. I really believe that we're going to come out of this better than ever.
Prior to the flood, a few weeks before the flood, I was asked to start to serve out at the EOC as part of the Linn County Emergency Management Agency, EOC being the Emergency Operations Center. I was actually supposed to go out to my first training session during the week of the flood.
The Sunday before the crest, before the work week even started, you know, we started to make preparations, because at the time we're talking about a crest at that point, you know, kind of in the 20 to 22 foot range. And so we already started making emergency preparations for protection of both the water plant and the wastewater plant.
Interestingly enough, we were preparing for, and had been preparing for, a drill that was going to occur on the 12th. The drill involved a scenario with mass casualties from the Ragbri race. So we had already been gearing up for the fact that we were going to activate our Incident Command Center.
Already we're in the town of Palo, which is upriver from the Cedar Rapids on the Cedar River. And we're already doing an evacuation up there. Almost 99% of Palo went underwater.
We started trying to figure out what we needed to do as an organization for the business community. And most of what we were trying to do was give people information, because there was so little information.
We were going to practice a process that we typically practice a couple times a year, but it involves, as I said, a significant number of individuals coming to the hospital.
We knew in the short term that we could operate without a wastewater treatment plant if we had to. but a water plant is just critical to us to function as a city, really as a society.
I get the call, it was Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. Went back to the chamber and said, hey, I need to go out and see what this is about. Might just be a couple hours, I'll be back. And I was gone for about 14 days.
I became involved with the county on the 7th of June and reached out to serve the city on the 9th of June because we knew the crisis was looming. We knew we were going to have a flood.
Actually, I was one of the members that came in on Tuesday to help sandbag around Central Fire Station, going back and forth to all down at Public Works and just truckloads of sand.
I was stationed down at Central Fire Station, and they called some additional people in to start sandbagging around our entrances.
It was like there were so many people and we were just doing everything we could. And when there was 30 to 50 people at one house and then you're like, well, there's nothing for me to do now. There's so many people here. We moved to the next house, you know, and we kept moving down the line as far as we could, just helping and helping and helping.
It was an urgent response, but you know, we still weren't sure what the projection was for the crest of the flood. I want to say at that time I think they were projecting 22 feet max, which was I think comparable to the 1993 floods.
First day of the flood would be Wednesday when the waters were first starting to come up. In the morning it was kind of basic operations for the fire department. There was some pre-planning that was taking place on the upper levels of our leadership of what might need to be done. They were talking to engineers at the city, trying to find out how high the water was going to come, trying to predict what the level was going to be at.
The police department in the briefing, looking at the maps, made it clear very dramatically that there was no possible way they could get to all of the houses in time to communicate. So their plan at that point was to actually just take cars and do loudspeakers, and they admittedly kept saying, but that is not going to be comprehensive enough. Well, at that point I spoke up in the briefing and said, well, we can get to the houses simply because we had such great success in time check.
Now along Ellis Road, it was just a matter of going out there with PD and making sure everybody was out of their homes. In Czech Village, we at that time had to use our boats, but it was because the water had came up through the storm sewer. So the streets were flooded with 3-4 foot of water.
Later, as time went on, the longer I stayed there, I remember a collective gasp across the room when they announced that the projections would be 24 to 25 feet. And of course, we all know it went up in the 30s. And by that time, of course, the meter that measures the depth of the Cedar River, I think, had broken by that time.
What happened is, I believe within 2.5 hours or 3 hours, we had enough volunteers deployed that evening got the fire department paper, every door knocked on, every person talked to see that the evacuation happened.
Went to bed this morning, and everything was okay. And it was like 4 a.m. when I laid down. I got up at 6, and it's really scary, real scary.
Hope we don't get no more.
But when I seen this morning, and then the police officer, he's like, "Are you guys packing up and leaving?" I'm like, "Yes, sir, we are." Yes, sir.
We were doing some inspections of neighborhoods that day down along the river in the Czech area, check down and stuff. It was about knee deep then.
Wednesday afternoon, we started taking, the river was rising. They were talking about crests of breaching the 21, 22 foot mark downtown. So we were checking our vaults. We were already starting to take water in some of our First Street vaults. So they actually had us that afternoon. We started to set up shifts where we're going to start pumping water. They started the sandbagging efforts. So we went in shifts at night. We were starting to just pump water out of the vaults and try to keep as much water out of them as possible. The deputies themselves, the people that you normally see out and about in the streets, we're doing routine functions at the same time. We have an entire county that we have to respond to calls in, but the majority of our primary concern had to do with payload. So they're kind of split between normal patrol, payload, and flood preparation for the sheriff's office and the jail at the same time.
as the water started to come up in the Czech neighborhood, we had a few calls for gas leaks and some other, minor things that we needed to check on. And so, we were driving down in that area of town in our truck with the water up to about our baseboards already by Wednesday.
I remember looking down on the corner, and the water was pushing the sandbags out from underneath the cement pilings, and they were starting to tip. And the city workers were trying to shore them back up. Well, then the same thing happened to the piling in front of my mom's house. And the city workers came one time, and they were pushing the sandbags back in, and they had, forklifts trying to push the sandbags back in, went on their way. It happened again, and the water was just gushing out, and the city workers drove by again, and I went out in the street, and I said, hey, we got a problem. And I remember they said, we're giving up.
The bridges were still open, and we actually went down on the bridge, and just the water, the movement, how fast it was going, the areas that were already flooding. Czech Village was already flooding. Over off Otis Road, they were already evacuating and flooding in that area. I was thinking, this is bad.
We started sandbagging at noon, built a real nice sandbag dam around the transformers, the control house, about 5 foot tall. And during this time, the water was coming up at a pretty good clip. The water got to the top of the roof, and that's about 11 feet.
We have 2 feeds for our downtown system, which would have been our Cedar Sub, which is over near the 12th Avenue Bridge, and then our 6th Street, out of our 6th Street generating station. I don't recall which one we lost first, but I think once 6th Street went under, we ended up losing it all.
We have trash pumps coming in to pump out the water that we know we're going to get. We're getting those in place, we're getting those situated. We have sandbagging operation going on. Lynn County Conservation came in and they were helping us with sandbagging around the building itself. And the jail is doing basically the same thing. You maybe have seen through media reports that actually inmates sandbagged around the correctional center. So we had the inmates out there probably for the preceding 3 days, I believe, that they were out there actually sandbagging around the back of the island, because we knew that was the lowest point on the island. So we actually sandbagged up, I think, to about the 3-foot level, trying to keep some of the water at bay.
It was becoming evident that the river was going to rise, and that it was possible that healthcare facilities would be impacted, not Mercy necessarily, but other healthcare institutions would be impacted. Physician offices, nursing homes. We were already in communication with the long-term care facilities in Vinton. So it was evident that the river was having an impact elsewhere.
I remember on Wednesday, a lot of the people in downtown business who were coming out and saying, are you going to be shutting power off? You're going to be shutting power off. Well, the company come out and said, we are not going to shut power off. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, we're not going to shut it off, but the water gets away. It may just take it. And essentially that's what happened.
I went there and I pulled the plug, or I de-energized Place Sub, Cedar Sub, Harrison Sub, which sits on the northwest side of Cedar Rapids, over by the old YMCA in Czech Village, and then Bertram Sewage. We had to pull the plug on that one too. And those are the subs that we actually lost.
I sent out an email to the Board of Trustees at about 1 o'clock on Wednesday, indicating that we had opened our incident command center and that we were reaching out to other healthcare institutions, and I did not anticipate that we would have an interruption of operations at Mercy Medical Center.
The water was almost to the bottom of the bridges completely. There were people all over the bridges and all over next to the river taking pictures. I remember saying to my partner, the jail's very close to being flooded. Have they evacuated yet?
By Wednesday night, it was pretty clear that it was going to be a major event, and so I didn't sleep much that night.
Our comfort levels going away very quickly. It was late into Wednesday night, early into Thursday morning, when we realized that there was far more water coming in the building than we thought ever would be imaginable.
By midnight, we decided this isn't going to work. Water's come up way too fast. We were walking in chest-deep water.
You know, and just watching the river rise, you could literally watch it come up the street. It wasn't as though it was any slow event. It was coming up very quickly.
On 2nd or 3rd Avenue, there's an underground parking garage. It was completely barricaded off, and there was water all the way in the garage. You could see it was just like the river just continued into the parking garage.
When the water was rising, our bosses came up to us and said, "We think we're going to need more help on the street, and so we want you to prepare your uniforms." And for most of us, we haven't worn a uniform in a long time. And so it was go down to the quartermasters and find something that fits.
As the crest numbers kept coming in higher and higher, we started to build to higher and higher levels, and we were actually sharing resources across the city over to the water plant. So things that were destined for the wastewater plant, we started shifting to the water plant. So sandbags, people, trucks.
We had pumps in place. We had maintenance over there helping out. In addition to the jail, right directly next door at the courthouse, they were doing exactly the same thing. So the facilities people were split up between both the jail and the courthouse itself, and our people were helping out mostly in the jail.
The waters were really coming up, and I think at that point we were kind of projecting 25 foot. And I remember making calls over to the jail, and because we could see from a different angle where the jail sat and where the bridge was. And there was conversations about, do you think we should evacuate the jail? And they'd already surveyed up to 25 foot and said, we can keep the inmates here, everybody will be safe, we're good to go.
There's a number of obstacles that that you don't really think about when you're driving through water like that. Manhole covers may be missing, very easily can drop a tire down in a manhole. There are fire hydrants that are covered up that you can run over. Just the things you take for granted that you see every day on the side of the road, along the curb, that you can't see when you're in knee-deep waters.
So we gathered our things as if we were going to be out of our office for a couple of days. So I brought enough work with me to, stay busy for the next couple of days. Obviously, I knew whatever impact the flood was going to have on downtown, part of my job was going to be in a communications role, so gather those materials, which I'm very grateful that I did.
We had a lot of people coming down as sightseers, coming through the downtown, that were getting in the way of the equipment that was trying to work to save these buildings. And the police staff, the fire staff, even the National Guard staff was completely overextended, trying to help people with sandbagging and with traffic and everything, and nobody was able to sort of stand guard on these corners and turn the sightseers away so that we could keep the streets clear for the emergency vehicles.
We were starting to get calls in the morning pretty early from city engineers that were wanting to take a look at lift stations and those types of things.
My first indication at the sheriff's office was that the basement had completely filled. We were actually starting to bring in considerable amounts of water on that long extended portion that goes back toward 1st Avenue, and the sewage pumps weren't keeping up.
We went ahead and de-energized the sub at 1 o'clock Thursday morning. The whole town of Cedar Rapids went dark.
We were in communication with both the existing sheriff, the sheriff at that time, Sheriff Don Zeller, and the command staff, and also the facilities director, saying that we weren't sure how much longer we'd actually be able to keep the building afloat, pun intended. But at some point in time, probably around 2:30 in the morning, we realized that we weren't going to be able to save the building enough to be able to continue to occupy it.
Well, it's confusing because when we left the night before, we were not planning on evacuating our building. We didn't know the water was going to get that high.
Those pre-plans had already been done by the city, and there were some sandbagging efforts to try to save those lift stations, trying to figure out, again, how high the water might be coming. And we were assisting the city at that point in doing some preventative things to try to save some of the city infrastructure.
We're now encroaching our first floor level on the 2nd Avenue side of the building, which is where our communication center is housed. So that became critical.
I knew we were in trouble because my husband was one of the lieutenants that was in charge of the jail at the time, and he had gotten a call very early in the morning from the sheriff and said, I think we need to evacuate the jail.
Well, about 2:30 again, 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, I received a phone call from the on-duty jail supervisor saying that, yes, the water levels were far exceeding what we had assumed, and they also thought that they were in need of actually moving forward with an evacuation with that building. The jail evacuation has been pre-existing since the Duane Arnold Energy Center came to Linn County as part of the requirements from the NRC. We contacted our EOC, Emergency Operations Center. We told them we needed buses. The city of Cedar Rapids stepped forward right away and offered up all their city buses, and they came over and started transporting inmates. We needed to find high ground, basically, for the inmates to go to. So we used the History Center parking lot.
The water came up fairly predictably Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Thursday at about 10 in the morning, it started to change. Instead of moving inches an hour, it started moving feet.
The rumors that were going around, there were so many, we would get so many phone calls about, you know, I'm hearing 380 is closed in downtown and things like that, and you just have to stay on top. And then you have to re-verify that, no, it really is still open and things like that. So, like I said, it's near chaos, but, you know, that's what we're really in business for.
My first thought was of a physician whose office is on 5th. And Dr. Carla Schultz, and I called, and when she answered the phone, the response I got was, "Can you send staff, and we need sandbags." And that was my first indication that this was going to be a little bit a different day than we had anticipated.
While we were doing the evacuation of the jail, the water level continued to increase. I remained at the sheriff's office organizing that detail. Sheriff Don Zeller and jail administrator Mike Carr were primarily over at the jail organizing that evacuation effort. And they were saying that, you know, 1 second the water level would be here, and 2 seconds later it's 6 inches taller, and it continues to rise. So originally the inmates were high and dry when they started to leave, and as the evacuation progressed, literally they had to walk through a little bit of water to get to the vehicles.
What started happening all at the same time is streets started to get flooded because we had about 6 inches of rainfall on that very day. So we had localized flooding along with the Cedar River, and that water had nowhere to go. So that started cutting us off. So I wasn't able to move back and forth across town between our 3 facilities. We weren't able to move resources around because we were cut off.
It was very real at that point. You know, who's going to be closest to a call is going to definitely change, just because we can't go certain routes. You know, and Edward Road was closed.
Rumor came through the crowd that they were taking prisoners out of the jail. And my first thought was, why on earth they waited so long?
I knew he wouldn't leave that island. So seeing it is reality of what he was dealing with. He told me later on that he was wading in water that was up to his hips in the jail.
We took all the inmates by bus from the jail. We had them shackled in what they call gang chains. We take several inmates, hook them together onto one chain so they're less apt to run off on us. And we load them onto the buses, and then the buses take them to the History Center. Then they grab higher ground, and then we can transport them by other buses to the varying institutions, escorted by armed deputy sheriffs.
As the flood progressed and drove the rest of the city staff out of the other parts of the city, you know, they were protecting public works, they were protecting the fire station, the police station. They got driven back out of those facilities and driven back out of the neighborhoods. And our wells started to go down. You know, we have 48 wells. They went down one after another. And the one well that we knew we had to keep up to keep water pressure going was Collector Well 3.
In fact, when I was coming in Thursday, I met several buses with a highway patrol or escort. I'm going, what is this? Well, it was the inmates from the Linn County Jail. They're going to Anamosa to the reformatory there.
We were still looking at the influx of patients and also looking at where the water was going to come in relation to us. And at that point in time, we knew 24 to 26 feet was about what we knew, but we also knew the flood gauges were down, so we didn't have a real accurate idea of how high the water was going to get.
At some point in time, we also brought in a straight truck to help out, and it wasn't meant for inmate evacuation. Originally, the state prison system said, we'll take your inmates, but we also need mattresses. So initially, the straight truck was brought over to house, to take all the mattresses from our institution to the varying other state prisons. Come to find out they didn't need them after all. And since the vehicle was there, we thought, what the heck, we'll also transport some prisoners in the back of that thing. They're only going to go from the courthouse to the History Center, which is about 6-7 blocks. So that also provided a vehicle to transport people in and out, especially as the water levels continued to rise.
That probably was one of the scarier things to watch unfold as those buses came one after another across that bridge.
Those guys, Lynn County Sheriff's Office did a great job evacuating that jail. No one was injured, no lives were lost.
The actual evacuation of the jail started at about 7 o'clock in the morning, Thursday morning. And it started at about 7, and by 9:30 we were completely done. So within 2.5-hour period, we had all 409 inmates removed from the jail. No injuries, no complications, everything went exactly as planned.
Thursday morning coming in, when I did come in that morning, looking off to the right and seeing the Dairy Queen on First Avenue basically about covered in water, and I was like, oh God. And then you really literally couldn't see the bridges, First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, down through there. I'm thinking, oh. My thoughts like, oh, what am I gonna do? I mean, what can you do?
Nobody's ever seen anything like this. This is a 500-year flood event. In '93, the river crested at 19.6.
Now, by Thursday, were frantic because nobody had expected it to be as high as it eventually went. And by Thursday, it was really too late to get anything out of businesses because there wasn't, the river had come up enough that you couldn't get vehicles through. And they had shut down the gas lines and they'd shut down electricity a lot of places. And so it really became a matter of survival, how much you could just get out to survive with.
That backup public service answering point, PSAP, worked flawlessly. I mean, that's the reason for the redundancy, is when one comm center goes down, you transfer over to a second one, and that worked very well. It worked even better when Cedar Rapids ultimately lost the police station, and they lost their joint communication centers. They also went to Marion. So the redundancy actually worked out very well, that we had 3 separate PSAPs in Lynn County.
All right, right now the Sheriff's Department's down, Fire Department main facility's down, the Police Department's down, and Joint Communication is down. Everything has been moved up to and forwarded to Marion. So right now Marion takes a 911 call and transfers it back down to us, and then we dispatch it. So right now we've got our units split up, 4 on each side of the river, and we're utilizing VHF because the 800 trunking is down, so we're using VHF right now and our cell phones, and we're managing to maintain communication right now. In addition to that, the ED is taking on water down at Mercy, so we're going to have to go down there and take a look and see what our communication center status is. We may have to move our communication center up to our main building here because they're taking on water as well. But right now we've got everybody staged out on street corner posts, and we've been able to maintain all of our service levels to this point.
And we stayed in touch with EMS. Their dispatch center was just adjacent to our ER, so we were able to talk with them. They would tell us which streets were closing.
I went right from my 24-hour shift right to into a boat, and we were dispatching a boat, and we just started out right from 7 o'clock doing rescues the next day. And then from then it went on to, I think that's as long as they let us work a 48-hour shift.
At 10 o'clock in the morning, Collector Well 3 looked like, just on its own without any protection, would be fine. We were several feet above the Cedar River. I came back at noon by myself, and water was to the doors of the Collector Well. So in a matter of hours, it moved, in 2 hours, it moved several feet up.
So once you started getting downtown, then you started seeing, how it affected people.
One of the first objectives that we had, assignments that we had from command, was to go down Edgewood Road, down towards Ellis, and try to gain access to a lift station.
ED nurses are very skeptical. They think everything bad's going to happen on their shift and it's going to be the worst thing ever. So we're always real skeptical about things like that. And being where we were at in the building, we were on the kind of the lower side. We started planning, and we weren't sure if it was going to get to us, but we wanted to make sure we had a plan.
As we approached the river down on Edgewood, the water was already coming over the road at that point, and The station that we were looking at going to was surrounded by a chain link fence. We could tell very quickly the current through that area was very strong. We did not have a rather large motor on the boat that we were assigned to, and so I quickly made the decision that it was pretty risky for us to take that boat into that situation. It looked as if the swirling current down through there on that first lift station that they wanted us to take a look at was not going to be possible for us to do that.
Once it got to that point, there was literally nothing to do. The water was coming over. I mean, there was absolutely nothing we could do downtown until the water receded.
You know, we weren't sandbagging a facility that was dry in anticipation of a flood. We were in the flood, sandbagging. And when the guys got there, they had been pushed out of the neighborhoods. They'd been pushed out of, you know, protecting key city facilities, and morale was really low.
We were assigned to rescue people trapped in usually residential houses that needed to be brought out that had no other means to get out. And that's what we were assigned. We were assigned to go from one house, and as soon as we dropped the people off, and their landing zone was usually First Avenue West.
There were probably 30 city guys who'd been sandbagging since Sunday, and they're exhausted. And I started laying out the plans to protect the well, and one of them said, you know, we've lost everywhere we've been. We've been pushed out of everywhere we've gone. So what makes you think that we can protect this facility? What makes you think we're going to do any good here? He was right. I mean, deep down inside, I didn't believe that we would save that well. I mean, I really didn't. But I didn't show that.
What people don't think about is the river doesn't care how far away from the river you are. The river cares about how low you are or how high you are from the river. And literally, I took a look at some aerial photographs that we were able to get during the crest, and you could see the low-lying ground that led the water directly to Mercy.
Around 1 o'clock that Thursday afternoon, we actually held our first staff meeting here, and I informed the staff that we were going to begin sandbagging outside the facility, but this was only a precaution.
I thought it would never get here. Even though I saw it in my heart, I believe it's never going to get to Mercy. We're too far up. It's actually a little incline out in front of here. And I was just sure that even as it came up, we were going to be able to beat it back.
I said, you know, well, we're going to save this well and drop that sandbag into the water. So when we were dropping sandbags, they were disappearing below the surface of the water.
Tim Charles had pulled the entire hospital staff together and made the announcement and said, we just don't know. We don't know how high the water is going to get. We don't know if our staff's going to be able to come in. And our ultimate goal is patient safety, and we've got to take care of our patients. We have to do that. So we need everybody to stay. And there was no grumbling.
We worked until about 5 or 6 o'clock, just hammering away at trying to keep above the river.
At one point during the day on Thursday, we had 18 boats at one time that were out and about. And what the department tried to do was take those of us that were river rescue trained and put them with the outside responding agencies. So we had radio contact with our command, and you know, we knew the streets a little better than, obviously, than the folks that were coming in from the outside. And so I was just assigned to Ely Fire, who had their fire chief and their assistant fire chief that had brought their rescue boat down. And so that was my assignment for about mid-morning on Thursday through the rest of the day.
There were so many things going on. I honestly don't remember when the police station flooded. During our patrolling, you know, you're driving around trying to do as much as you can do in one day, and you don't keep track of the time or anything. You just know you need to react to it and start getting people where they need to be and start getting things where they need to be.
We were floating through backyards. We were floating over fences. We were utilizing, you know, sides of garages and cars and those types of things to kind of, you know, push us along. We weren't real sure what was under the water. We were worried about the prop getting beat up pretty bad with all this stuff floating in the water, and so we were just slowly making our way over down Ellis to start responding to some of those calls that were beginning to flood in at that point.
The actual flood level kept rising. You know, first it was going to be 20-some feet, and then it was going to be 27 feet, 28, and you know, day by day we just knew it kept increasing, and we knew that more and more places were being impacted. We knew it was coming up 8th Avenue. So it was just, you know, moment by moment, hour by hour, more information.
My initial thoughts were that it couldn't really happen here. We're about 5 blocks from the 500-year floodplain.
You're used to navigating these streets in a big fire truck, and now you're going around in a boat, and in the back streets, someplace 10 feet deep, up to the porch roofs, and calm. You know, this water, when you get further away from First Street to Second Street, it was just like backwater. It was very eerie just to see. It's unbelievable. You keep thinking, I don't believe this. It could get this deep, this far.
But as the days went on and the water started getting higher and higher, going in there, you know, it's devastating to see that people's livelihoods, you know, the only house that they might have known is destroyed.
They're all right. Up to the office. They're all right in the office right now, but if electricity goes back out again, they won't be. So that's why we have to use the cell phone. I don't want to use the landline number and then turn around and have to tell them, never mind, our landlines are down now, use the cell phone. And I have no idea why the VHF is working, but let's put it this way, ain't nothing working.
When I had called in to see if they needed some assistance, they said that our dispatch at Mercy Hospital was gaining water.
We're going to have to abandon ship here at Mercy Hospital and move the dispatch up to our office. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to close the ER. It's a foot of water and it's coming bad, man. You need to call Marion and call State Police and tell them that effective at 5 p.m. we have changed our dispatch center location, and they are to call 366.
The water was coming and we were getting really close, and by that time we were evacuating at the same time they were evacuating.
We were real busy about evacuating the citizens and taking care of everybody else that we kind of forgot about ourselves until the water started coming in.
Cedar Rapids suffered tremendously. We lost the police department, we lost the jail, we lost the sheriff's offices, we lost the federal courthouse, we lost the FBI office, we lost the U.S. Attorney's office. Every government building, city hall, everybody was on the river. And we didn't know it was going to get that high. Nobody did. They didn't predict it that high.
The city ran out of bags, or sand in bags. So they'd been bringing us sandbags all ready to go. Well, we had sand and we had bags, but we didn't have sand in bags. And with 100 guys in the river, you know, following us as we built the wall up, it was right behind us. Well, always staying, you know, just a couple inches ahead. We knew we would run out of time at that point, and that's when we put the 911 call for volunteers. You know, and I just said, hey, we need anybody we can get. We need volunteers. We need people to put sand in bags.
A lot of the main dispatch areas had already been flooded and had to be rerouted to different areas, and the ambulance dispatch area was one of the last ones kind of standing in Cedar Rapids. So it was amazing to watch how all these paramedics and everybody came in and very carefully, but yet very quickly and methodically detached equipment in a very quick time frame and reinstalled it in their new area. And in that process, they never dropped a call and never missed a 911 call. It was just amazing to see them accomplish that feat.
You know, now we're all packed in this little space, and you got to make it work.
They told me on the phone, when you come in, don't go to Mercy Hospital. We're up in the office now.
Well, once dispatch got moved up from Mercy up to the office, our normal dispatcher moved from 1 to anywhere from 3 to 4, and other people answering the phone, helping out.
And 45, last I heard, there were barricades eastbound at Highway 30 and C Street.
We have double the staff right now, and we have double the resources out on the street, and we will continue to have that number until further notice as we wait and see when the river crests. But right now we've got 8 ambulances out, 4 on each side.
some of us kind of received an update. At that time there was some planning going on as to what if the ultimate became a reality. In regards to that, I mean evacuating the hospital.
Keith, we got a phone call from Brad saying Mercy is accepting patients, just nothing with CAT scan.
CT is down at Mercy.
But they're
Well, I
taking-
just got a call from Mercy that said they're not taking any ERs at all. We're to take everything to St. Luke's.
So in conjunction with our medical director, Dr. Pospisil, and our director, Tammy Meyer, we really started talking it through, and a couple of the other ED physicians, and we had to make that determination that we had to go on diversion. We couldn't continue to take patients in. St. Luke's was fully functioning up the street. We had stayed in touch with them all day. It was amazing, the communication and the way that the two hospitals worked together.
The thought of losing the water system brought the flood to everybody's doorstep at that point.
I'm out patrolling the areas, and I'm watching how high the water's getting and going, okay, it must be about done now. But it kept coming up.
Now the flood was at your doorstep, and the community responded to that. And there were young people, there were old people, and I remember just seeing a group full of people, a handful of people, come down and start filling sandbags.
There were some people in the Czech Village area that refused to leave, and I believe it was Thursday evening, or it was Thursday evening late, that they had to go back and get them, that they asked to be evacuated. At that point, it was, Czech Village is a very dangerous area because the current was basically running right through it.
We had individuals, a gentleman by the name of Dave Siegel, who works for Ryan, who was on vacation and just decided at the last minute he needed to come in. And Dave is an individual who's credited with helping to close a key vent that was flooding in the basement. I mean, water was literally pouring into the basement, and he arrived just at that right time, fashioned this plywood plug that he bolted. And I look at this massive vent that he was able to secure. And I still, for the life of me, can't figure out how one individual could get that accomplished given the force of the water. But he was there at that right time, and he got that accomplished.
In less than an hour, we had evacuated the ED, and it was almost as simple for the nurses, and with the planning that they had done through the day, was they pulled the cardiac monitor off the wall, stuck it on the end of the bed, grabbed their tablet, and walked the patient up to their new area, set them in their bay, plugged things in, and they were essentially done.
And then I'd turn around again, and what was a handful of people, grew to probably 200 people filling bags, and some more bags kept coming out. And then probably 15-20 minutes went by, and I turned around again, and you could see the floodlights. They they lit up the whole area along Ellis and out into the collector well, into the river where we were. I turned around again, and there was probably 1,000 people now filling bags.
Having to break into people's homes is not, fun. You don't want to damage their property. We tried the best we could. We'd check all the doors, check all the windows. If the window was unlocked, we'd go through a window.
We didn't know anybody that we were helping, but we met them and we talked to them, and it was brief and it was like in a state of crisis, so people, we're very grateful. But then you wake up in the morning and you see that it didn't matter anyway. It was all underwater. Very sad.
Then we went back to building the wall, and I was pretty select on the volunteers that I would let out. The thought in my mind was, I was letting out these big corn-fed Iowan guys out there, and there were some big boys out there, and they were wearing nothing but a t-shirt, sandals, and shorts, and they're standing in Cedar River sandbagging. And it would take me like all my strength to lift some of these bags. There was boys out there pulling 2 bags in each hand, just throwing them on, just big guys. Again, I was focused out there, and then all just without a command or anything. I don't know how it happened. 4 lines of volunteers just formed right down to the collector well. So we had a whole army of people filling bags. They were like ants. All you could see was movement of shovels and movement of bags. It's all you could see when you looked up the road in the floodlights. And then a wall of like humanity came right down to the collector well, and you had everybody. I mean, you had people that were elderly, 50, 60, 70 years old, trying to fill a bag with one little shovel. You had kids 15, 14 years old out there.
Initially, I started out sandbagging. They asked for just a few volunteers to start with. We were just going to do around some of the doors and stuff, because at that point the prediction wasn't that high. So we just started putting sandbags around some of the doors and stuff. And as the water kept coming up, we then had more and more staff at that point start coming out. But at the same time, the street was flooding and cars were still driving down it. So they were causing waves to come up to the hospital. So at that point, me and another lady that worked with the valets went out and started directing traffic around the water so we didn't have those waves coming up against the buildings.
We noticed that there was other departments starting to come as well. Radiology, the laboratory, pharmacy, and that's when we had really started to get water inside the building. And a lot of it was the sewer water that was coming back through the toilets. We had some groundwater coming in through the basement, but our facilities guys, it's one of those things you have to be there to understand. You just can't explain the job that they went through and what they did in order to save that building.
They just handed bag to bag to bag to bag, and we did what took us all day, we did in about a half hour again. And so we built so far above that I felt we were to a point that we needed probably those resources somewhere else in the city. And so it took me probably 3 or 4 tries and about 10 minutes to get the bags stopped. These people just kept working and working and working and working, and I'd never seen anything like it.
My friends and I jumped in our car and we made the trip to Mercy at about 10 o'clock at night, and that was an image I will never forget.
It was absolutely incredible. I was running around down the basement and checking stuff, and every time I came upstairs to the lobby, there'd be another 50, 100 people throwing sandbags.
We pull in and we pull into the downtown area, and it's pitch black. It's absolutely, can't see anything. The only thing that I could see was the floodlights from Mercy where people were sandbagging. And looking as I walked up towards the entrance to Mercy and realized that we were 10 blocks from the river and the water was nearly waist high, it was a certain reality. Up until that point, I think we were all just so reactive. There was really no time to respond emotionally. It was all about reacting to what the task before you was. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see that kind of impact had happened.
I don't know if it's Thursday night or early Friday morning. I came down and looked out at the Lundy Pavilion and saw the volunteers.
Earlier that evening, we had literally hundreds of volunteers out front sandbagging the front of Lundy Center, and the chief of the fire department had come and was telling us that we had to get our volunteers out of the water because there was another squall coming with a lot of electrical activity, and he said for their safety they've just got to get out of the water. And so I actually came down and went out these doors and stood on top of the embankment of sandbags that they had built. And there were trucks and volunteers all along the front of the building. And I was saying, thank you, you guys have been great, but for your safety, you have got to either, get somewhere safe, get out of the water, or come inside.
We were able to defend that collector well, and we stabilized our protection.
The National Guard came in to help us out, which was a great help, and plus the other agencies. We had Minneapolis, and I hate to start naming some because I know I'll miss some, but Iowa State Patrol, Nebraska State Patrol. We had all these agencies and the National Guard help us, which we couldn't have done it without them.
The water's up around the emergency room entrance. There's National Guard vehicles. Obviously a lot of volunteers out still doing sandbagging work, and the lighting was poor. It was just surreal. It's like something out of a movie.
I mean, it was absolutely incredible. They stood in the water, they stayed at it until all of the sandbags had been removed from the truck and laid in their place. And then they came inside and kept working. Absolutely remarkable.
So when those troops rolled in and when those squad cars rolled in, there was a huge sense of relief because we knew we've got backup. We're a big department, but I don't care what size your department is. When a natural disaster hits your city, you need help. And it was the first time that Cedar Rapids PD had to reach outside of our own borders and say, we need help.
I'm from a military family, and it still was shocking to me to see people dressed up, full fatigues, guns in hands, Hummers blocking the street, blocking access to our own downtown.
And all of a sudden, I look around and the National Guard is in my town. And there are federal agents in my town, and police officers from other states are here. People from FEMA and the Red Cross are here. And I thought, this doesn't happen where I live. This doesn't happen here. And the magnitude of how severe this was started to, when I was at that checkpoint, just really started to sink in. This is what we hear about happening in other parts of the world, and now it's happening here. And other people are looking at us saying, oh, those poor people in Iowa. And I didn't want to be in that category.
Wow, this is what you see on TV happening in other areas, and the National Guard has to go in to keep the peace and, keep people out. It was very surreal, and to see them, standing with their guns on the bridges, making sure, nobody could go into downtown, nobody could go into the flood areas, patrolling the flood areas, was very, almost scary.
I was really grateful to see them because not only did they have that the professional experience, the crisis management experience, they also had the emotional experience to be able to talk to and be calm yet assertive with so many people. I mean, to their gratitude, they were talking with a lot of people that were just emotionally scared.
It's only something that you see on TV, and here it was happening in our hometown.
There was talk initially too of, Mercy Hospital having to be evacuated. And that's when it really kind of sunk in that, wow, we're gonna be overwhelmed here in a little bit.
16 ambulances.
And I actually was at home, was called, I believe, around 11 o'clock to return to the hospital that serious evacuation planning was taking place.
I remember them closing down ER in the afternoon and moving it to the backside because they said, don't let any more patients come through, direct them over to this other area. So I knew about that, and I found out about the evacuation from one of the area ambulance employees that was walking by over to their shed and said that they were getting ready to start evacuating.
Where are they gonna go and how are we gonna deal with this and still function as we normally do? And that was probably the hardest part, was the initial, yes, it's gonna happen.
Before we actually started evacuating the hospital, I remember being in the command center on the ground, or on the first floor at Mercy, and seeing Mr. Charles standing in the corner by himself. The decision had been made to empty his hospital. A decision that a hospital administrator only has, nightmares about, I would imagine. And I remember this hustle and this activity, the command center, the phone's ringing. There's probably 36 people there working. And Mr. Charles is standing in the corner by himself, just staring at everybody. I'll never forget the look on his face. It, to me, summed up the entire flood experience. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. You just gotta step back and let things happen.
We were making the calls and they kind of see it in Tim's eyes. Tim, to make that decision as a CEO of an organization to evacuate the hospital was not an easy thing to do.
It was really the coupling of the reality that our emergency power system was in jeopardy with the fact that we were beginning to move so many essential services at once that the reliability of the facility became something that I could not ensure.
These things don't happen a lot. If you look across the country, total hospital evacuations, they just don't happen. You don't do that.
And then when we
you know, I've been in the business a little while, so I know where the ambulances are, and didn't really know a whole lot of people, but could remember a few names that I could pick out, and gave them a call. And once I started, it just kept coming until I believe we had 26 ambulances raring to go.
I have a background in EMS and fire service, and so I have some background in disaster planning and that kind of thing. I immediately met with Chad Ware, knowing his background, his involvement at the federal level in disaster planning. We quickly realized that there's no way we could evacuate this place without a coordinated plan, and we had to do it in a systematic fashion using organized triage.
Now we have all these ambulances that are taking the ICU patients from Mercy to Luke's, and you know, not only do we have that, but we also have the 911 calls, you know, what does fire need us to do, where are we going to go, how do we get there? And then another concern too became, you know, what if we have to take somebody down to the university?
Our long-term plans had always relied on Iowa City, Mercy in Iowa City, and specifically the University of Iowa hospitals with their huge capacity. They really couldn't help us. They were anticipating their own disaster. So the Iowa City was in essence off limits. And so we had to rely heavily on facilities we never planned on as part of our contingency. Small community hospitals like Vinton, Macokota, Iowa Falls, small county hospitals that stepped up and really took a brunt of our patients. So the plan was very flexible, very fluid, and the state was real instrumental in finding facilities that could accommodate our patients. And we had to look everywhere. We couldn't just send them down the street to Iowa City. We had to look everywhere. And I think we sent patients to 21 cities throughout the state.
My first thought was, how are we gonna get these people out? You know, we don't have enough ambulances to get these people out and about. We don't have enough ambulances to cover the city while we're doing this. Where are they gonna go?
You know, and the nurses and the patient care staff and all the staff, everybody had somebody with them.
Our goal was initially that we would go floor to floor, and how that worked was we sent a physician to each floor, or each nursing unit, as we call them. We went through every patient chart, did a brief survey and scan of the chart to identify the patients who we deemed were the sickest, who needed care urgently and could not be without vital service. We then went room to room with nursing coordinators and nurse managers from each floor, did a bedside triage, and we organized our patients on each nursing floor based on the urgent need of transport.
And then I remember Tim Charles, about a couple hours into it, coming up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Chad, we have a problem." We all kind of stopped and we looked and we thought, okay, we're evacuating the hospital. What other problem can we have at this point? And he goes, "We may lose the elevators in an hour. Water's coming into some areas and we need to move these patients a little faster." And I said, okay, that is a problem.
We had a lot of patients to move, and it's not as easy as saying, well, send 10 patients to Dubuque or 10 to Clinton. We had to send some specific patients to specific locations based on their capabilities. For instance, Old Wine Hospital helped us, but they only had a couple beds for cardiac patients, for example, or the beds that were available in Clinton could only accept certain types of patients. So in essence, we had to go back through our patients, re-triage constantly to find patients that would meet those criteria. Patients were then subsequently tagged, for lack of a better word, with the destination.
I remember looking at the nurse managers and I said, okay, start at 9, bring everybody down now.
We never were without resources. We never waited for an ambulance. We had between midnight and 8 in the morning, we had a constant movement of patients out the back door. And there was always transportation and resources available and waiting, some from as far away as Peoria, Illinois.
It was amazing that we removed that many people in that amount of time with what we had.
These are smart Midwestern people. They knew it was a problem, they knew it was a catastrophe, and they knew they had to do what they could do to help out. The patients were stellar through all this. There was no complaining, especially the older patients. They understood that this was a crisis, that this was a catastrophe that nobody could plan or foresee. The patients were all very accommodating. The first floor was hot, it was crowded. You could smell the diesel fuel from the ambulances outside coming through the doors.
You know, and I remember one of the patients, you know, sitting there, and another one of the ones that was trying to make me laugh and make me smile when we were going through the line, and they were all trying to keep everybody happy, and everybody was, you know, again, even the patients were trying to work with us, you know, and I said, okay, he's going to Guttenberg, and he looks up and he goes, Guttenberg? Where in the hell's Guttenberg? And I was like, he just caught me, and I was doing one of those, and he goes, I'm just kidding you, you know, and off he goes, and he's just smiling, and, you know, and it was another one of those moments that make you laugh.
And I remember many of those faces looking at me, many of the old men shaking my hand, saying, don't worry about it, kid, we'll be fine.
The crest is finally, we finally reached the crest, and we're headed back down now. We're into a recovery plan now. We like to get businesses back in to try to get some essential things that can get them back up and running.
We all started getting on the phone, started talking with the fire department. How can we do this? How do we make sure this is safe?
Is it one firefighter per group, or is it two firefighters, or?
Probably one firefighter. Tonight what we're doing is reestablishing our perimeter. We're going to have guardsmen out there, and there's going to be what we call strike teams in here, patrolling in our perimeter and making sure there's nobody down here that's not supposed to be down here.
And Lee and Doug really took it from there, coordinating that skywalk recovery.
We'd been here all night, basically, and we knew employees were going to be coming in, so the message went out, everybody gather in the cafeteria. And so Tim gave a state of the hospital message to them, talked about the evacuation and things, and then he did the most beautiful thing. Many of our employees lost their homes in the flood, and Thursday and Friday morning I kept thinking, what if they lose their jobs because we don't have patience?
We'll continue to work together. You will continue to be compensated as you have. You will not experience a change in that. You can know that your job is there, and then we're going to march into the future together.
Tim said to employees, come your regular shift. You won't be doing what you usually do, but you'll get paid. It was like the most marvelous thing I've ever witnessed. That was a profound investment in our employees, and just spoke volumes of who Mercy is. So that is another one of those things I'll never forget.
The business devastation is far worse than we thought it would be a couple of days ago when we were preparing for this, and it's a very, very heartbreaking, horrible event that we just endured.
We are working with the city. We have firefighters that are going through, making sure that the air quality is okay for the people to go back in, even briefly. There are several gas leaks throughout the buildings, and so we don't want people to get sick, fall down, not know that they're there, and not find them for a few days. I mean, that would be the last thing we want to have happen. So we're trying to do it as safely as we possibly can and still allow people to get the kind of equipment that they need in order to get their businesses back up and running.
They were small businesses, you know, missing one day was missing a lot to those businesses. They couldn't afford to miss 2 or 3 days. And what I was most impressed with was the gratefulness, you know, the polite, the thank you for letting us, you know, have access. Thank you for organizing this so that we can get to our things.
We were sandbagging on Tuesday with everybody from our office and OPN upstairs, and I got to tell you, I didn't think there was
any way that the water would come up to our front door. And based upon what I saw last night, it looks like it's probably covering our windows. It's probably come up to our second level, and this is serious. And what's interesting is to have been here this morning and realize that the thousands of people who are facing absolutely the same situation we are. And I'm totally impressed as I'm hearing lightning and thunder with the response that everybody from the mayor on down has made for this. It's incredible operation.
We made a round 2 of letting business owners, property managers, building owners actually go into their buildings where it was designated as safe from the fire department and police department, and let them go back in to retrieve only essential items. We were designating a minimum of 3 to 4 people per group and letting them go in to get, again, just the essentials, limiting them to a half an hour with a firefighter escort.
That, I think, took place on a Saturday, and I think even on a Sunday. I think it was a 2-day event. Simultaneously, the Army Corps of Engineers came in, and I got tasked with coordinating the water distribution points. They knew by that time, I think we were down to 1 well in the city, and they were asking the citizens and businesses to conserve water. I remember the first day showing up at the Westdale water distribution site, pulled into Westdale and saw the line go all the way around the actual mall, just waiting for us to open that first facility. And we had 3 semis there. Volunteers from Serve the City, they stepped up. They were able to coordinate 2 groups of volunteers working several hour shifts. I think we ran the water distribution sites from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Out, and June, it's hot. The sun's beating down on blacktop. These people were out there giving of their time, but it was just it was really neat to see all of the people that were coming through.
I thought everybody was nuts. I figured we'd get a couple 3 inches, and we finally got back in. Would have been this past Wednesday, and I was told I had 7 foot of water in my upstairs. My basement was full. I had a lot of friends and a lot of family that have helped get me through it. I mean, I'm displaced. My wife and I have a 10-month-old, and we're trying to live, living with her family for right now, but my landlord's being excellent. He's here right now helping us get everything out. He's got a lot of houses down here. And it's just a group effort. The city's doing everything they can, and we'll get through it one way or another.
The common term is disasters are always local, and that's where this response starts and that's where the response ends. You're the first ones there and you're the last ones to stop. So it was true, and we were the first ones there. We were there the whole time, and we're still here. When other people and other agencies leave, we're still here. We have to live in this community and be a part of it.
We were heading down to fuel up our truck, going down 6th Street, and everybody's out, working on their houses and stuff, and here sat an old man with his golden retriever on the sidewalk in front of his house. Wondering, wow, what's he gonna do? Just sitting there, day after day. I think he sat there 3-4 days with his golden retriever right on the sidewalk. Makes you wonder where's he living? What's he gonna do now?
It's 3rd Street that bothers me more than anything because I lived there for 3 years. It was the first place my husband and I had, and we just had moved out of there in February before the flood. So that's still my neighborhood. That 3rd Street, New Bohemia, is still my neighborhood, and I know everybody on that street. And I think, our apartment was above the Henry Davidson Youth Center. That's 14 feet above the street, and it took water. And I think about all that we could have lost, but my neighbors lost everything. So I feel a little bit of, this one's hard. I feel a little bit of guilt because I got out and they didn't.
You know, the hardest thing to see throughout the entire flood process for me, being a lifelong Cedar Rapidian, was the neighborhoods. I mean, the Time Check neighborhood, the other neighborhoods that have been affected, I mean, these are not new houses. These are houses where people have lived here and passed on their houses to their siblings. And I mean, you hear of the people that have been in this neighborhood forever because they never wanted to move out. And the same thing on the other sides of the river. So the hardest thing for me was really looking at how all these neighborhoods have been affected. I mean, the Boys and Girls Club, we're going to survive. We will. We're going to find a way to do what we need to do and serve as many kids as we can serve, no matter what happens. But to look at these neighborhoods and to see how these people have been displaced, you know, and to see, you know, it's interesting with a flood because your personal possessions are still there when you're done. They've just been ruined. And when you think about, you take for granted the photo albums and the memories that you have in your homes, and to see those things just lying on the sidewalk, being ready to be picked up because you can't have them anymore. You know, you can't do anything to clean those things up. And really that, I think, to me was the hardest thing to take, is to see that these families are going to be displaced for quite a while. And they've lost more than just a club, they've lost their houses. And some of their families aren't even together right now because they can't get into a place where they can all be together.
The day it crested, stood on the skywalk above 2nd Street and cried. Cried, because it was so scary. But we're turning it around.
Where we did get some national attention that other disaster-stricken areas didn't, because the people of Cedar Rapids decided they were going to own this. They weren't sitting around waiting for anybody else to fix it. That was their problem.
George Jones down the street, one of my neighbors who, right after the flood, I mean, it must have been 2 days after it crested, as soon as he could get down here, sat up a card table in his folding chair and put a sign, a sign in front that said open for business.
Well, the future of the whole neighborhood's very uncertain. This is a 120-year-old building. My biggest thought is that it's going to be like a smile with no front teeth.
It got up halfway to our 2nd floor, and that's where I put things to save stuff. So everything was gone, and a lot of it just floated away because half of our house the sidewall is completely washed away. It's shocking how quickly everything that we take for granted and virtually civilization can just be washed away in seconds. Just seeing that sacred part of your life just completely destroyed is devastating. Especially, it's not even so much your own reaction, it's the reaction of your family members that's heartbreaking.
Uncertain at this point. We're waiting for the Historical Society. Parents own the building. They've put a damper on everything. They're just moving slow. Other than that, not sure at this point. I want to come back here. I've spent 25 years of my life here, so.
We've made an 8-year commitment to helping build the new Bohemia Art and Cultural District, and we're not going to quit. We're going to come back and approach that with more enthusiasm than ever. I intend on bouncing back up, not just finding a level. I plan on coming back, better than ever.
I'm amazed at what's been done, and I'm still somewhat amazed at what hasn't been done. I don't think someone like myself who doesn't understand downtown and the infrastructure can really appreciate what it takes to put it all back together. What bothers me more, I drive on the west side through Time Check or the area along the river on the west side, and you can't help but think about what these poor people are doing. You see the empty homes, you see the rubbish out along the street, and in some ways it's like it just happened. It's evident to me that this town is still healing. It's evident to me that there's tons of work to do. But I think we've done a remarkable recovery in 1 year.
I've never seen a rally of unbridled generosity and giving and care and concern about, even us as a company. I've been humbled by the calls and the gestures of folks who wanted to help. But on the sand pile Thursday, as we were sandbagging, you saw everybody in this community rallying around, trying to do what they could to do their part and seeing if it would make a difference. And that was pretty neat to see.
We've had over 160 volunteers from across the country come here and help us. And not just put in an hour or two, I mean, they put in entire days to help us. And we couldn't have done it without them.
Well, I would have to say the moment that I described of standing on the sandbags in front and seeing these individuals waist deep in water, passing sandbags, next wave of storms coming in, understanding the potential risks to themselves personally, that they would say, no, not until we're done. That to me was just one of the most extraordinary moments. Personal courage, absolute devotion and dedication to the facility. And there are so many people that I still run into who were here that day, who can't wait to share that with me, that they were a part of that experience. They were a part of that night with Mercy. Just moving.
With this entire flood, we didn't lose a single life in the city. That is amazing to me from what I was able to see in the 3 days on the water. I just can't believe we didn't lose a single life.
It doesn't amaze me that no lives were lost because I think we were prepared for this. At the last second, it kind of caught us off guard as to how much water we really received. But it didn't catch us off guard that we've got a plan to deal with it. So enact the plan and move forward. The EOC was already operational, had been for almost a week prior. So just enact the plan. We'll get this thing worked out. So that didn't surprise me. Conversely, when you look at a flood of this magnitude, and you look at 10 square blocks of downtown Cedar Rapids, you look at 99% of the town of Palo, you look at all the devastation up and down the Cedar throughout the county, and you look that no one was seriously injured and no one was killed, it is a little bit, I don't want to say amazing, it is a little bit noteworthy if nothing else. But again, it does government, it does law enforcement, it does EMS, it does firefighting. It says a lot for us.
I knew it was a big deal. I'd been involved in those plans. But to have all these staff members, the hard workers of the hospital, the people I respect the most, come up to me and comment on how well it went and how it couldn't have been done any better, that meant everything to me. Obviously, it was a reflection of what they had done, not me. But it meant to me that we were all part of something very big that we'll never do again. And it also impressed upon me the fact that we have a story to tell. And we've learned lessons that we can teach other places, and since have. To me, that was the most important part. I wasn't surprised with how it worked. I wasn't surprised how hard the nurses worked. I wasn't surprised about the attitude of the patients. I wasn't surprised that we had ambulances come from Des Moines and Peoria to help us. I expect that. That's where we live. This is the best place in the world to live. And when we need help, it comes. That didn't surprise me at all. What surprised me was the humble nature in which the work was done.
It's going to be years before we recover. And I feel like, if you want to look back on your life and felt like you accomplished something, this is your chance. And so here's your chance to dedicate part of your life and help Iowa work through all these issues. And when I look back 20 years from now, I'll always be able to look back on not just that night, but all those years after, feeling like you did something worthwhile.
People still have hope and are looking past the destruction
and the devastation that happened, and that they're still saying, you know, this is my town, this is my place, this is where I'm going to stay. People who have been there all their lives, that memories were destroyed, but they're prepared and ready to make new memories here in Cedar Rapids.
I remember walking through downtown and walked by Zinn's, and one of the people who was cleaning out the restaurant came out holding a tablecloth, and the tablecloth looked like a brown square on a white tablecloth, and you could see where the silverware was and where the glass was. Those were still white, where the water had come up, and then all the sediment had just landed on the top of the table. It was such a statement about how high the water got, how filthy the water was.
It's kind of hard to describe how your heart can break in one moment and start to heal the next, you know, when you see such good things happening. And that's really what I personally, as a Sister of Mercy, experienced during all that. My heart was broken when we didn't have patients, but to just witness our employees, it was like, it's okay, we're gonna make it.
The most important thing that I've seen happen in all of this is just the whole community kind of coming together and talking about, okay, now what can we do to make it better? Because this definitely has changed how we're looking at things. So now let's just start over and do it.
In most cases, people of Cedar Rapids, they're not standing on ceremony, they're going in and doing it themselves.
You just think, wow, it's going to be forever coming back. But it was pretty remarkable how fast everybody got back up and running. Those that were able to. And we've lost businesses here in town that won't ever come back. And that's the tragedy of it.
At this point, my heart isn't ready to take on the battle again of restarting my business. I'd been down there for 3 years, so I was fairly new at it. So then this was just a devastating blow. So at this point, I've decided that I don't know that I can financially or emotionally reinvest to try and start a business back down there again.
We believe in downtown, still believe in downtown, and really struggle feeling bad about what's going on with us when we know that there are people without homes. They don't have a place to go home tonight, and we've got 100 blocks of this city that are just like this, and so our thoughts are really dialed around let's do what we have to get our things put back in place, but then we're thinking on the same in those same thoughts, what are the other things we can do to be helping others that could use a hand.
We're very excited to be part of the farmers market and to be here because it's really an indication that downtown is on its way back, that people are committed to downtown, and it's one more way to celebrate what downtown has been and what downtown is going to be in the future.
I was excited to be at the farmers market today because I wanted to see people back downtown, and I'm so thrilled to see that the weather's great, the vendors are here, people are here, there's energy and excitement, and so this gives me hope that we're on the road to recovery.
We did, I think, one of the very best jobs we could with what we had thrown at us. So that made me very proud.
I think it would have taken us a long time to be part of Iowa. But I think that night we really became part of Iowa.
We try to be civic-minded, and we love coming downtown and to New Bohemia and to Czech Village. So it was really sad to see, and since then, that time too, it's been like, oh, hey, let's go. Oh no, we can't go there anymore. Oh, let's go. Oh, we can't do that anymore. And so it's unfortunate.
I definitely like to see gringos come back because I really miss the queso. How it comes on a candle and it's hot and you dip. Oh, that's good stuff. So I really like to see that happen soon.
Freedom Festival. Downtown. I know it was delayed last year, but I love taking my family down there when it's getting dark. There's thousands and thousands of people. I, of course, being the father of young children, like to see my kids' excitement when the fireworks are going off. and really just walking around downtown on a nice warm night, maybe going to Deb's Ice Cream and getting some ice cream before or after. You know, it's going to be exciting to be able to do that again this year.
I'd do it again. I've had people ask me that. You know, would you go through all this again? Sure. You hope you never have to. I wouldn't have put all this money and time and energy back into the place if I wouldn't do it one more time if I had to. The place has been here since, bakery since 1903, and so it's going to continue to be a Czech bakery. So I'm hoping to just keep the tradition going.
Polina's not being in Czech Village or coming back is a shame. There's nothing positive about Polina's not being there. I mean, it was a part of the avenue, just like the museum and the bakery and the pillow shop and Arbuckle's Tattoo and Czech Cottage and the Red Frog and everybody. It was a part of it that made it work. I mean, there is no sense in Mike Ferguson walling around in self-pity because his business got flooded. I mean, it sucked. And I hate it, but there's nothing I can do but move on.
It's been overwhelming, but it's really actually given me a new sense of pride in where I live and the community that I'm a part of. I don't think that any other community could have pulled together the way that we have in these last few days.
You know, having been to, only lived in Iowa at that time, 4 months, and my family had moved from Oregon that week. It was their first week in Iowa. I hadn't really seen Iowa, a lot of Iowa, but as I've shared with a lot of people, I saw Iowa that night. That was the best of Iowa, and it was the people. That's what Iowa's about.
It's not surprising because that's the way we are. This is the Midwest. That's what we do. When someone needs help, we don't question as to the need for help. Our question is, how much do you need and where do you need it, and we provide the help.
We asked some very sick patients to lay awake all night, to be transported long distances, and never had one complaint from a patient. It's great to be in Iowa.